have all my tracks in Ableton labeled by their key, so that, let's just say I'm jamming on A minor. I love A minor. It's a great go-to. It's right in the middle. I could pick apart the song from my library that's A minor, because they're all color-coded with the specific key. I was able to create a system for that. And I could look like, boom, okay, the light purple is all A minor. So then I'm looking at, not looking, but I'm listening to what I'm doing, and I'm thinking, okay, BPM, let's say it's 100. I go over to the library and say, okay, we've got 100. I'm going to try to find something between 90 and 110 that's in A minor. So that part is what we're going to play, or that song is what we're going to play, and segue from what I might have been doing on the loop. It's not even a single device, about 6 different devices simultaneously that are all playing stuff. So in that way, it's almost as if I am my own band.
Yeah.
I can't obviously play the drums and the bass simultaneously, but I could play the drums, have it loop, and then play the bass the next moment. Yep. Exactly. So it's as if I'm tailoring in what I loved the most about a jam band. So they're just free flowing, they're having a great time, and there's no commitment to anything except where they start and where they end. And to me, that's one of the coolest parts about jamming with somebody or playing music with myself, is that I know how the song starts and I know when the song ends, but I don't know what's going to happen in the middle.
You're listening to the Freio
Music Podcast.
To the Freio Music
Podcast.
My name is Patrick Kiebzak, and my music project is called Momentology.
And where are you from, Patrick?
Well, I'm out of Asheville, North Carolina right now. I was born in New York and raised partially in Florida. Also lived in South Florida for quite a while. So I've been a transplant from a lot of different places.
Nice, nice. Well, first of all, that's a beautiful studio setup. Let's talk about it. How did you possibly get all those instruments into one room with so many computers and keyboards and lights, and it looks really clean and artistic and friendly and inviting?
Well, I appreciate it. So it's kind of a culmination of the last, we'll say, 19 years of gear collection. So from age, I think I got my first APC 40 when I was 18. I was living in my parents' house and I was just producing music on Ableton. I just downloaded Ableton 8, like their little free trial. And I got a little, that APC 40 and started to play around with it. And there's one piece of gear that I still have in the studio. It's back there. It's a MPK Mini by Akai. Everything else, though, from that phase, I've sold or moved around. So that's like the ancient relic. But you can imagine since then, I've bought maybe a couple things a year. And you just be surprised how much things pile up over the years. And just recently, I've kind of been able to use every single thing that I own musically in the studio.
That's amazing. How did you organize it in, like, I know right before we hit record, you mentioned that you actually had to go to a spreadsheet in order to demystify how everything's going to connect and wire together.
Yeah. So I've been using this online app / program called Miro. It's like a visual whiteboard. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's super helpful because I'm a visual guy. I'm also kinesthetic, so I learn hands-on, but I also learn visually. Audio, funny enough, if someone's like talking to me, give me instruction, it's probably one of the worst ways for me to learn something. So when I'm setting up this studio, I had a moment where I was so overwhelmed by the amount of ins and outs and audio looping back and going out to OBS and so many different cables and routings through 1, 2, 3, 4 interfaces and a mixer and 4 computers. Now it's down to 3 because I got a new MacBook. But I had so much stuff going on that I was like, okay, I need to find a way for me to map my own organization out, because like I said, I felt overwhelmed by my own work. So I go on this Miro board, and it's essentially a gigantic web-based whiteboard that acts like a spreadsheet for me, because you just input information and you give it like cool labels and colors and stuff. And from that, you can draw lines to different things. So if I was putting my mixer on the Miro board, I would have lines going from all the outs to all the ins, and then I'd have the interfaces that I have separately for the computers on different parts of the board, and then lines to that, but then also lines from where the computer's going, where the instruments are going. And I had to do this because there was no coherency to it in my mind, and I knew how it worked, like I knew it, but I said to myself, I'm like, okay, if I just kind of wing it and attempt to figure this out as I'm doing it, it'll probably work. But I feel like if I do it in a more methodical way, because I tend to do most things in my life in a bit of a methodical way, I feel like it'd be easier for me to operate. There's a saying that I've kind of lived by. It's like to master, teach. So I taught myself my own studio input-output flow essentially through making this Miro board, this big whiteboard thing. And it was quite a journey. It's taken like a few months to like finally figure it out like 100%.
And is Miro, is it kind of set up like a bird's eye view, like things are actually where they are located in your room, or?
That is level 2, actually.
Okay.
I've not done that yet. That's actually a great idea. I just I took a picture from like Google and threw it on there in the Miro board, and it just shows the thing. So if this was my mixer, it would show the mixer I actually have.
The real exact mixer that you've got.
Yeah, nice. But they're not in a specific order. It's actually a good next step. They're kind of just all in an area.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting and very fascinating too, that you mentioned that audio is your least preferred method of learning.
Yeah.
But yet it is your desired output, which is kind of interesting. So how did that evolve? Like, how did your interest in music start? Was it at age 18, as you mentioned, or was it before then?
It was well before that. It's a great question. I love talking about this because I feel like history shapes us. And at the time, history is the present. So going all the way back to age 3, 4, 5, I was always requesting, funny enough, classical music in the car rides with my parents. We would be on a trip somewhere going, or even just commuting around town, going to school or whatever. And I would always ask for the classical music station. I don't even remember this, but my parents tell me this now. And I grew out of that phase, but that just kind of shows where my head was at way back then. Eventually it became really apparent that I was going to be totally enveloped with like classic rock music, because my parents are descendants of the 60s and 70s, and they had a total love and passion for, let's just say, psychedelic classic rock in that era. So like one of my dad's favorite bands is Pink Floyd. My mom's a huge Moody Blues fan, Beatles, Zeppelin, Jimi Hendrix, all those really sweet classic rock bands, the classic ones like that we would play on a 60s playlist is what they grew up with. So in the 90s and 2000s, when I was growing up, I would be just exposed to that on a daily basis. And it kind of shaped my interest because I had this really limited knowledge of music at the time. And just having them expose me to it was really cool because I got to see what they like. And then in essence, I started to like it because, okay, well, this is music now. That's what I was exposed to. And that transferred over to me playing music in a couple of various, let's say, school band projects. There was a percussion class that I was a part of for 4 years straight where I played. It was kind of a we'll say like a random assignment at the beginning of the year. They just said, okay, this is what you need to play. And I really want to play drum set, but there's like one drum set player in the whole class, I guess you could say it was. And they gave me marimba. So I'm really happy they did, because marimba is like a two kind of feeling instrument. You have the melody, you could play a lead, you could play chords, but then at the same time, you're playing kind of a percussive thing. So you're understanding rhythm like with your hands and using a mallet. It's almost as if you're drumming, but but you're not drumming. You're playing a melodic instrument. That eventually evolved because I didn't, I guess, choose to play marimba. It was just kind of put on me, and eventually evolved into playing guitar and bass. And around that time, like age 16, 17, 18 is when I discovered Ableton and started to do my own musical adventures around that time.
Nice. And so the marimba gave you the access to the rhythm and the melody. And how did that translate to the guitar? Because it's totally different. It's strings, there's no mallets.
Yeah.
And so how did you pick up the instruments that you were actually interested in? How did you start to teach yourself or learn?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess thinking back, a guitar is always something that you see and you really respect the person playing it. It seems so intimidating when you look at a guitar. It's like 6 strings. You got to really press your fingers, especially if somebody picks one up for the first time and tries to like do a chord or something with their fingers. Yeah. It's painful. And like after a couple minutes, you'll be like, what is happening in my fingers?
Yeah, why am I doing this to myself?
Yeah, it's like torture for the first month or so. So I would say that it transferred in the sense where if I'm strumming a guitar, like the right hand is always rhythmic in terms of either picking. So doing palm muting, like tuk, 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 that's always rhythmic most of the time. And then chords, long strumming, that's always rhythmic as well. And then the left hand is the more technical one where you're fretting and moving things, but it's also still a rhythmic thing because if you're deciding that you want to play chords, if you want to go from an A minor to a G, you have to be able to move your fingers in the rhythm to hit that chord either before or at the one or the beat that you want to do it. So the marimba, I guess, created this rhythm with the hands that just kind of became muscle memory at that time. And then the guitar, it just felt, okay, this is easy because I already know the basis of it, I suppose you could say.
Nice. And I see that you've got the electronic drum set there. So you ended up moving over to the drums as well. And I'm just curious, like when you're starting a track fresh, where do you start? Do you start on the guitar? Do you start on the keyboard, drums? What are your thoughts?
Musically, I tend to start with some kind of beat or rhythm. I've always been a foundation player in the sense where I like to think of music like a dinner or a plate of food. So a track, you could say, is the full meal, right? And then the bass and the drums are the meat and the potatoes. We'll just go like traditional American food here, Southern comfort. You can't really have a full plate of food in a Southern meal without some kind of meat, protein, and then definitely potatoes. Like they're always there. This could be like replaced. You could say like quinoa and something else, if you want to get different about it. But it's essentially, it's the base of everything, and not base like BASS, but base like the basis, the foundation of it. So I tend to start with one of those. Definitely a rhythm is essential. Maybe not like the full drum expression, but having some kind of beat, a metronome, something to keep me on time, and then a low end. Or I've really been lately diving into learning the piano. I never actually learned the piano at all. It wasn't something that I was exposed to. So really in the last few years, I've been learning it like way more intently. So recently it's been like a beat and maybe piano just to get some chords, and then I'll add the bass, and then from there it's complete random, whatever I'm feeling at that moment, add, subtract.
Nice. And are there any typical go-tos when you're in Logic and at that random stage where you're adding, I'll go off your analogy, adding spices and flavors and hot sauce and whatever you're adding? Are there any particular go-tos, plugins or VSTs?
Yeah, there are. First, Ableton. I use Ableton 11, and I feel like the solid ones for me are Sound Toys, the bundles of Sound Toys. It's like a full pack that I got. There's a few that I use specifically, like Microshift is awesome. I like their Echo Boys. Little Alter Boys, cool. These are just like effects that I would add on to something after the fact. I went through a really big plugin phase on Ableton where I just got a bunch of stuff and I was using everything. And actually, funny enough, more as I kind of progress my own production skills, I find that I'm using less plugins. I don't know if that's just a product of not wanting to be bothered by having a separate window and just having it down in the interface of Ableton, like in the bottom. Probably not so much that, because it doesn't really bother me, but it kind of influences a little bit. But I think Ableton does kind of everything I need it to do, mostly. Like any plugin that you could find, you could do everything for the majority of sake inside of Ableton with a lot of tweaking sometimes, like getting in a Sound Toys effect. You could do it. It just takes a while. So it's like a quick drag and drop. But having the plugins accessible plus just using Ableton mostly has been like recently my flow over like the last year.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So let's back up a little bit. So when you were in the bands and you were creating music, you were told what to play. I mean, like physically what to play, and then also like what songs. I'm sure that the teacher had a direction for you guys. When did you start realizing that you wanted to create the unknown? You wanted to create the unwritten?
So you're going all the way back to like bands in school. So yeah, it was a complete, this is what you do. And there wasn't much room for improv. There's like a little bit of improv room. I think we had one featured solo on this performance we did when I was on marimba. And for the solo, I believe, from what I remember, we were allowed to just do whatever we want. Obviously in the same key. We don't want to make it sound bad. That was, I guess, my first glimpse into not having to conform to any one thing. But it was only like 15 seconds. So I was, in a way, conforming to the 15 seconds of freedom. It's like forced freedom, like choice A or B. We're going to tell you what both of those choices are, but that kind of, I guess you could say it sparked something, because I realized there was a whole bunch more to music than just cooperating with what someone tells you. And it was, I think, I'm gonna say in 2006 is when I started to play guitar, like for myself. I sat there with the guitar. I borrowed, actually, my mom had a super old acoustic guitar back when she was learning guitar in the 90s. And this thing like had the worst intonation. It was like so hard to press, but I just sat through the pain and I kept playing for months. And this was the spark, and this is where it's kind of funny. You know the band Tool?
Oh, yeah.
One of my favorite bands of all time. I just love how they mix hard, heavy rock with really deep messages and awesome, intricate time signatures and changes and polyrhythms. It's quite an audio site, I guess you could say, an audio listen to hear. So I was listening to a lot of Tool at the time, and this was probably my last year of high school, and I felt the need to play some kind of instrument. So I'm going to back up from the guitar thing. I actually got a Guitar Hero for that Xbox, like the original Xbox way back then.
You're like, oh, this is easy.
It was so simple, man. I hadn't actually played guitar up to that point, though. This is why this is kind of funny. I'd done the marimba and the percussion and stuff from the school. So at this point, I beat the entire Guitar Hero game on expert. I went through beginner, intermediate, hard, expert, and I was like, that's okay. That was a game. That was cool. That was fun. And then I really got interested. Maybe I could play Guitar Hero with songs I like, because at that point they're just giving you songs and you just pick from their library. So I'm like, what if I try to play like a Tool song on Guitar Hero? And they have like download packs or something at that moment, but there wasn't any Tool song. So I looked into it on Google, and I found this PC kind of emulator. That I had a PC at the time, and it was this really deep, intricate process to get the controller to work on the computer, and then you had to download these game files that people made. And there was some Tool songs on there, but I'm like, it's going to take way too long. It's just like a lot of investment. So I actually decided just to play the guitar. And at that moment, I just picked up my mom's acoustic. I went into her closet and got it. And I sat down, I just Googled, like the first one I learned was Lateralis by Tool. I Googled Tool Lateralis tab, because it's a guitar tab. And I just started to learn how to play it. I was so bad because I hadn't played guitar pretty much ever before that. Maybe like I strummed a few chords here or there. But I ended up teaching myself, let's say like 90% of the Tool library on an acoustic guitar in about 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
And it came from Guitar Hero. Funny enough, I got to shout out my actual brother, Jesse. He was living, we were all in family house at the time, and he was like, dude, why don't you put all this time into a real instrument? and I'm like looking at this plastic little controller. I'm like, yeah, I could do that. And then really when I learned that you couldn't play the songs I wanted to play on guitar, that's when I'm like, okay, you might be right, but obviously I couldn't allow him to be right. It's my choice, but he did influence me a little bit.
Oh, that's great. You got to have that, that kick in the rear sometimes, just like, but that's cool that you like reached the expert level and then you're like, okay, there's got to be more. I want to keep going. And then you're like, all right, I got to download stuff, install this on a PC. And I'm sure it sounds pretty complicated to do, but
it was. I looked into it and I was just like,
yeah,
I could put like 3 hours into this, or I could put 3 hours into learning a Tool song on the actual guitar.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. So tell me about how, because you didn't start on like CCR, strumming, simple stuff. You started with Tool. And it seems like you dove right into the deep end, but then we're able to figure out how to swim fast and learn everything. So what strategies did you use to, obviously you had the tabs, so what the truth is or what you're supposed to play, but how did you get yourself to be able to play in those foreign time signatures or rhythms or things like that?
Well, my love for the band and their music was so apparent that I knew all that stuff just out of my own, I guess, being, you could say, like listening to the songs so many times. I could sing them. I could sing all the lyrics, but I could also almost sing the guitar parts. Adam Jones, their guitarist, he's a very technical player, but also really simple at the same time. He doesn't do like crazy tapping solos or anything out of the ordinary. It's a pretty standard guitar. It's just the way that the band cooperates with each other, and then the kinds of changes that they can enact from things that shouldn't be changed into, like going from like a 7/21 time signature into a 4/4. Like there's some really weird changes that I didn't even know.
Tell me about that 7/21. Help me understand that. What is a 7/21 time signature?
So
7/21?
Yeah, I believe that's it. It's for one of their new tracks.
That's
it's
pretty
Tempest.
wild. I've never heard of that
actually, I'm giving that as an example of some of the stuff that I did kind of learn. So, like what a 4/4 time signature is. So 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4, 1 2 3 4. So the song I'm referencing is called Tempest. It's off Tool's newest album, and they have songs like this a ton, but this is the only one that I can actually like reference off the top of my head because I think it's so impressive that they did this. So I actually just looked it up. So 21/16. Sorry, I was off even. So 21, 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. It's like it goes all the way up to 21 16 times. So they do that specifically because that's how their phrasing works. And like in the normal instrument/guitar world, normal phrasing is just you go for a bar, you go for 2 bars, 3 bars, 4 bars, and then you just restart and maybe do another phrase. They just have another level of complexity and understanding with music that just allows them to do this. And I super respect that. I love the way that they work together, because listening to them, and this is really what drew me to them in the first place, and I really do believe it influenced a lot of music that I make. Their guitar and their bass will be doing something, and their drum will be doing something completely different, almost in another dimension of music. And then what will happen is the drums and the guitar will link up and start doing a very similar rhythm and time signature, but then the bass will change. So then they do this kind of shift where one person has a role that's like outside of the music that they're making, and then they kind of rotate that, and it becomes almost like this weird complex dance that somehow works. I can't wrap my head around it. I think that was why it was easy to learn, because I didn't have to really wrap my head around any theory. All I had to do was just remember in my head what the notes were, because I could almost sing the guitar parts at that point. I knew the song so well. So looking down at the guitar and being like, okay, that note is the 7 on the D string. I had to really sit there. It was actually over a summer. Right before college, I sat there and just really tried to understand slides and hammer-ons and pull-offs and different kinds of techniques that allowed them to get those kinds of sounds. And this was, mind you, on an acoustic guitar in drop D. So you can imagine the sustain of a rock band. It does not translate to an acoustic guitar. There's no distortion. There's no reverb, no delay. It's just a twang. So I had to really make sure that I was doing the correct positioning, because sometimes if you're playing like an electric guitar and there's a distortion on it, you can get away with a mistake because it just sounds like noise for a minute. And I really felt that, I feel now that that was almost this training incubator that allowed me to just push through and learn this, even though it was pretty dang hard.
And what gave you like the mental willingness to just keep fighting through? Because I'm sure it sounds like you heard the music in your head, you understood the music mentally, even if maybe there wasn't theory behind it, but you kind of intuitively knew the song. But then your fingers have to learn something different. And so there's probably a lot of frustration between what you want to play and what you're actually playing at first.
Yeah. The most frustrating part, I could play the parts. It was a hard time getting the speed down. So I would listen to the song, look at the tab, and then look at the tab while the song is not playing, and then play the parts and play them super slow. Like I would have to look and make sure my finger was going up to the right fret and then do the right bar chord. They do a lot of drop D bar chords. And I would have to consciously make an effort to get the right notes. And then after I learned all the notes and the slides and the way that my hands moved from fret to fret, then I just decided to speed it up a little bit, not listening to anything at the moment, just doing it, and then speed it up a little more. And then finally, I would go like section by section over. I mean, their songs are long. It's like 7-9 minutes is normal. I would do like 1 minute or a chorus, and then learn that fast, or actually the speed of the song, I guess, was really fast to me, and then move on to the next section. And then the hardest part was putting all the sections together because of the changes that they had, which I'm sure you know, they're just kind of ludicrous. And it's really funny because in the same, I'd say 2-year span, I actually fell in love with the band Fish as well. One of my favorite bands still to this day. I love their live performances. So I was listening to two completely separate, we'll say, vibes in music. You got this kind of hippie jam band that evolved from the Grateful Dead, and then Tool, which I don't know who you could even say they evolved from, maybe like Rush and Pink Floyd and Megadeth or something. So there's these completely opposite end spectrum bands that I ended up getting all this inspiration from, which eventually led me to, I still know the Tool songs, funny enough, but it led me to create more of like a nourishing experience for people. Like if I'm playing music for them, I'm like, hey, come on in here. Let me play Tempest for you on guitar and, you know, knock your socks off with this distortion. Like I didn't really want to do that. So I ended up learning, it's funny you said CCC. I learned obviously that song, Bad Moon Rising by Creedence, and probably about 30 to 50 other cover songs over like the next few years of like good feel good stuff, from classic rock, again, all the way back to the influence of my parents, a lot of Beatles songs, Hendrix. And it just kind of led to me really trying to learn other songs, going from this technical Tool background and drop D distortion to really feeling, okay, maybe there's a more nourishing part of music where if I want to invite someone to listen, I'm not going to feel like they're a little bored, like, I don't know what he's doing. And maybe like, okay, that's a song. I could sing that song. I know that song. It's relatable. So that was a big kind of aha moment for me. And that's around the time, funny enough, where I found my first band members, the officially band members.
Nice. Well, let's talk about that. So when you started performing with a band, how, you mentioned that you wanted to kind of transition towards nourishing music.
Yeah.
So how were you able to convey that with other people?
Yeah, nourishing, I guess you could say more friendly, danceable, more approachable, like anybody could listen to it and love it. Because there's a big niche, I guess, when there's metal involved. It's either you love it or you don't.
Yeah.
I met a guitar player in one of my classes in college. I'm actually a certified teacher, so I went to school for that. And
to teach music? I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, actually, it's a bachelor's in education, so it's kind of a general degree. And then I do teach music these days, though. It's great skill having the knowledge of teaching. So it was like probably the second year of college. So I was totally into music, still playing pretty much by myself. I think at the time I maybe jammed with like 3 people total from my entire life, up to this point. And I remember specifically that the teacher, Dr. B, rest in peace, one of my favorite teachers ever. He was so inspiring. He was like 75 years old, up at the front of the class, just being the most amazing teacher you could imagine, just by the way he talks. He's funny, really engaging to people. So he created this atmosphere in the classroom that was very free. Like you didn't have to step in line at any point. It was very like flowing. And funny enough, he came from kind of a musical background from what I heard. So he was doing like introductions the first day of class. Tell us one thing you like about yourself plus your favorite color. It was like this really weird kind of thing, but that was some things he did, we found out. And I just remember saying I love playing music. And then there's another dude in the class that loves playing music. There's one more person say loves playing music. And after the class, we're all kind of mingling as we're leaving. And we ended up standing in a circle outside the classroom for like 45 minutes talking about music and what we love and what we're doing and just, hanging out. And we exchanged numbers, and then the rest is history. We actually formed a band, and then about 4 years after that, we didn't have a band anymore because of certain things. And then the guitarist and I, the initial one that I initially connected with, we ended up forming another band. So it was a period of about four different bands, a few other people involved, lots of different styles of music. We played a lot of covers at first, and then we started getting into our own originals that were, I guess you could say, a mix of kind of dub, reggae, rock, psychedelic, jam music. So it covered a lot. We kind of went into a lot of different spaces, which is what I like about music, is you could really express in a lot of different ways. So the guitar player and I formed this other band, which was a 2-man electronic jam band, which I still love to this day. It's called Acrodamus. And we had an awesome outpouring of music. I think we released like 2 albums or an album EP. And then he had to move. So he had a commitment in another state and he had to go. And I had just worked, 4 years with him, creating all this music, building a local following. So like when we played a show, we'd have a bunch of people show up. This was in Tampa, Florida. And he had to move. And I'm like, kind of sitting there. I'm like, okay. Like I wasn't upset, but at the same time, I was like, well, I just put all that work into this and I can't play an Acrodamus set by myself. There's like, that's 2 people. That was what our band was. So that was a huge turning point where I decided that I didn't want to have to be dependent on anybody to perform my music. And it was kind of a rude awakening because I actually stopped doing music for about 1.5 years because of that experience. Because again, I wasn't disappointed or upset. It was more just like, well, dang, like
all that effort. Yeah.
All that effort. Yeah. And it shows, there was a huge learning experience over those years. And that's when I was really using Ableton and really diving deep before crazy YouTube tutorials on how to do it. I really decided to just buckle down and learn the program, and we performed with it. We produced our songs on it, and that's still what I use to this day to perform and produce. So it was a blessing that I was able to use it that early.
Well, tell me about that mental shift when you mentioned that you don't want to be dependent on anybody else to perform your music, and the fact that you took time off, maybe trying to figure out what you ought to do. But tell me about the mental shift where you're like, no, I could do it solo. Like I've got everything that's necessary.
Yeah. It wasn't really an I could do it solo moment. It was more of like, if I'm going to do this again, if I'm going to put a bunch of time into a project that I am passionate about, because I wasn't getting paid a salary or anything. I wasn't making money I needed for rent. It was really just kind of an extra thing. And because of that, I guess you could call it a passion project at the time. So I'm like, okay, if I'm going to put all this energy into a passion project, I want to make sure that regardless of what happens in the world, pending any kind of natural disasters, I could still play music no matter what or who or any circumstances outside. And funny enough, actually, around that time, I went to Boulder for the first time. took my car across the country, quit my job, and just trekked on out west. This was from Florida. And I just remember going, driving through Denver and then going down and up that, I don't know what road it is, but it was so beautiful at the time, and hitting the Boulder Creek and just getting out. And I think it was at that moment where I was like, I need to take a break from music because I just need to connect with nature. I need to kind of get back to what I came from, we all came from, and also feel supported in other ways. And then maybe when I feel comfortable again with my own musical journey, maybe I'll, I guess, rediscover it. And that was an amazing few months of living out of my car by choice in Boulder. It's a great place to do it, I'm sure you know.
Yeah, well, yeah, you chose a beautiful place, and I'm assuming you went up the canyons and everything. And
yeah. Hiked the Flatirons a bunch, man. It's great to be able to ride a bike up the hill and then just park it, lock it, and just walk like 1,000 feet up. It was the most magical thing at the time. It's still magical, super magical. But at the time, I never had done quite anything like that. So it was as if I was discovering this new world after all these years of just knowing like flat ground, I guess you could say.
That's funny. Yeah. So what were your friends, what were your family thinking? You're like, okay, he quit what he's doing. Now he's living in his car. He's just hiking up mountains for fun. You know, like how did you, I don't know, maybe overcome that pressure to fall in line, so to speak?
Yeah, there was a big, I guess, stigma pressure around what I was doing, but I didn't really pay too much mind to it. I knew it was there, but I knew that what I was doing was the next step in my life. I felt at that point I was getting just stagnant. It was actually, like I said, I went to school to become a teacher, and then I worked in a school for an entire school year. I remember I saved up just enough money to be comfortable for about a year. From everything that I had been doing. I had a couple side hustles, like obviously music, paid a little bit, doing gigs around town. But that was a moment where I said to myself, I've lived for, I think it was like 23 years at the time. I was like 23. I lived for 23 years kind of in the shadow of other people. Like I had decided that it was that moment where, I guess you could call it empowerment. I was like, I'm just going to do this because I want to do it. Nobody said, hey, go to Boulder. No one said, hey, quit your job, don't have a house, and just go. No one told me to do that. And it was just like this thing that I felt empowered because I know that I was the only one who chose this. And the process itself, I was more elated and sad at the same time going through this whole process with myself than I've ever been. There was moments where I'm like, I am so alone right now. There's like nobody around me. I haven't talked with anyone in like a day or two. So I hadn't had like any human interaction, just completely by myself. And I had to rely on myself for like every single thing at that point, which had been completely the opposite of how I was raised. I was living in my own place prior to that. So I'd known how to, function as an adult, especially working a full-time job in society, but I hadn't like really been in that meat grinder situation where it's you and that's it, and you don't have anybody else or anything else to support you. I had a Kia Optima that I was traveling around in. It was just like this small sedan, and I slept in it a couple times, but mostly I had different areas that I would camp or stay with friends or people that I just met a couple times, just like hanging out somewhere and meet somebody, and it's just like explain what's going on. Like, what? We got a little guest room in the back, cool. You want to stay here for a couple of days? And then that was like a new experience that I wouldn't rely on it, but I would embrace it when it happened because it was almost as if, we'll say like a higher power. It's like, here you go. This is the next step. And living that way was really fun, but I would never do it again.
So what do you mentioned empowerment, like the self-reliance and maybe you had some mental like clarity afterwards, or at least a new perspective on life after doing that.
Yeah, dude.
What were some of the major like lessons that you feel like you learned, or what was the turning point that got you out of the car and back doing, other things?
Yeah. I was on the phone with my dad one day. I remember I would check in with my parents like a couple times a week, either text, but I called him this time. I just wanted to like chat and see what he's up to because it's been like a couple months. And I remember he said something to me and it really hit me. I think he said, I'm not going to quote, but it was something along the lines of, you can only do nothing for so long without getting uncomfortable. And I'm like, no, I could do nothing forever. And then I remember kind of hanging up the phone, put it down. And that night I really thought about it. Like, I really haven't been doing anything, I guess, productive for my professional development, career, musical development. I really kind of started taking inventory in that moment of what I did want to do. And it was about a week later, I called a buddy up who, my best friend, coming back all the way from New York when I was born. We were actually born in the same neighborhood, like, or not neighborhood, we were born in a hospital, but we grew up in the same neighborhood from age 0. And I was literally put into a crib with this guy at age 0, like the day after I got back from the hospital. So we have a really special connection, you know, from all the way back then. And I call him up, I'm like, Eric, I need help. I need somebody to come to Boulder to drive back to Florida with me, because at this point I just felt like it was a little much. I almost felt overwhelmed just by the responsibility of just going back there, because I loved it in Boulder. I really didn't want to go. But if somebody was with me, it was like, maybe I could do this with somebody else. So we had a lot of trials and tribulations on that trip, which was a total story in itself. But that call with my father and then having the drive back really, really, really got me to think about, like, okay, if I want to do something with my life that I want to create, and that is a complete product of me and my own energy and not anyone's influence telling me what to do or what not to do, I'm going to do it right. I'm going to start from ground zero, from point nothing, and then create my intentions and really what I want to bring to the world, and in essence, the effect that I want to see it happen. And that was a moment where I was also going to like concerts and events at the time, and I would see the effect of the band or the DJ or whatever on the audience. It's like, that's really cool to see. It's almost like a form of mass hypnotizing, like, but it's not. They're not hypnotizing. They're playing music, which is putting people into a different state than they came in. So there was a moment of clarity where I said, okay, I want to be able to create that feeling with music that I make and have people that are open to it go into that feeling, because we're all in the same space. And it was almost like, this is what I want to see. This is the effect. And what music do I have to make to get that effect?
And was the effect that you were looking for external?
I guess it shows up in external ways, but no, it was mostly more internal at the time. I really wanted people to go introspective and go inside and be on a personal journey during a music set or something, or listening to a song on Spotify and feel like they're going back to themselves almost, in a way.
I see. So when you were aiming to do this, your impact was external, but your hope was that the individuals who were impacted went internal.
Yeah, exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Okay.
I could probably quote that and put it on my website right there.
I don't think that was that eloquent. I think
I loved it, man. It summed it up perfectly.
Okay. Cool. Well, I just wanted to understand, like, the effect that you were aiming for. Was it an internal effect for yourself or for the external audience? But
yeah,
it's kind of both.
Yeah, absolutely. 'Cause if somebody goes internal and they're having a great time listening, then they're going to do something on external to express that, whether it's dancing or yelling or crying. Like, I've had people cry during live sets before. Like, there's a wide range of emotions that happened, and that's why I really like music. I love music just because of how moldable it is. You can have so many different styles and vibrations that come from an instrument or a computer that produces sound that you produced on your own in a different room. There's like so many opportunities and places to explore with it.
Well, that's beautiful. I appreciate you articulating that. I want to dive into a few of your songs and kind of understand a little bit about your creation process and some of the inspiration behind it. Sure. So let's start out with Little Wing. I think that's a Jimmy.
Yeah, Jimmy cover.
Jimmy cover, yep.
That's all she thinks about is riding with the wind. When I'm sad, she comes to me.
first of all, it's DJ Taz, and it's got like this, but there's like a unique vocal element to it, where maybe it's vocoder or pitch bend or something, and I feel like it's a refreshing take on kind of a classic.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious how you guys approach that and how you made it.
Yeah, again, back all the way to the car rides and stuff with my family. They were big Jimi Hendrix fans. They absolutely loved his music, and in essence, I loved the music. So that had always been a song where I would cover it, and I'm kind of jumping through the conversation here, but in my 20s, I would pick up the guitar and play it. It was like such an easy song to play. It's like 4 chords, and the lyrics, I knew the lyrics from my childhood. So it was a complete, just simple song. It was very simple to learn for me. And all I fast forward to working with Taz, I find out he has a very similar love for classic rock, and the different things that I had that shaped me also shaped him in a certain way. So we started doing these covers that we love music from. So we did a couple Beatles ones, we did this Jimmy one, do a few Pink Floyd ones. Again, bands that we absolutely love, that we just want to pay a bit of a homage to, plus have an awesome song out. And Little Wing was probably our 5th one that we did in that realm. And since we both loved the song, it was just the next step was to make a cover of it. And yeah, the vocal element that you mentioned, so that is something that I feel like is pretty sweet for music production, is when you could make a vocal sound not quite like it does when someone's talking, but also not too over the top. There's a really gentle mix there. And that song specifically is nice because all the old recordings of Little Wing from Jimmy, they're kind of crappy recordings. Like, they're not awesome. There's a few that are pretty good. They even remastered them now. But there's a lot of recordings that are very raw, I guess you could say. And we wanted to capture the rawness of that song and that era within a electronic vibed production. So having that halftime beat plus, funny enough, I had John Akradamis, the other half of that, play guitar on the song. We still work together a lot these days after a hiatus, and he doesn't even live near me, so it's all over the internet, which is cool. So it was that guitar plus those vocals, which were like kind of raw, raspy, and we really loved like those low, deep basses in the drums that are like super slappy and punchy. It feels like you take more modern elements like those things and then pair it with the classic song and the raw emotion and feeling there. And that's really what we were going for with that track and a bunch of other covers that we have too.
Were you guys in the same room when you were collaborating?
No.
Yeah, so you were just sending tracks back and forth and
yeah,
kind of mixing it as you went?
Actually, I don't want to say that for sure. I think at the time, I've actually lived in Chicago too. Taz and I lived very close to each other for a year or two. And I think we recorded that in my studio. But I do believe we finished the song and John sent us guitar remotely. So like we started it together and then we broke off and then finished the song separately, which is kind of interesting too, because it could be one or the other. Like you could start it together and then finish it separated, or you can start it separated and finish it together. It's a bit of a different feeling starting it in the same room, because kind of in that same wave. Whereas if you do something by yourself, send it off, it could be in totally different spaces, mentally, emotionally, whatever. So sometimes it's nice to just be sitting next to someone, even if it's on Zoom or something like this, because you really get to see the person, feel what they're feeling at the moment, whether they're super pumped or they might be a little depressed. That'll influence the song. There's a lot of things that go into production, more than just the technical stuff. You could be like kind of moody that day. And if you're moody, sometimes the song will come out even better because it's like got more of that raw emotion.
Good point.
I think we recorded that in the winter, funny enough. It was like kind of broody outside. It was like snowing. It was Chicago, super windy and crappy weather. So it was like this kind of incubator where we're like, let's make a good song,
Nice. Well, I'm just curious because you mentioned it, but how do you collaborate while on Zoom or digitally while you're like, how would we do it?
Yeah. So usually one person would be, it's typically me and my collaborations, like main production on Ableton. And then on Zoom specifically, recently you could share screen, but also share high fidelity audio and what's it called? There's like a mode for it, actual audio, original audio or something. But you can, this is a good pro tip, you can enable the original audio and the stereo, and also both use headphones so there's no feedback. And then the audio comes through super clear and you get all the panning and everything while sharing the screen. So there's like a tiny bit of a lag. It might be a half a second, could be just depending on internet connections. But in general, it's easy to just share the screen and work as if, you're sitting right here. You're looking at the screen, listening to the audio. You're sitting on the computer screen now on your place, listening to the audio and looking at my screen. So aside from just being able to like fist bump when something's awesome, it's very similar to that.
And then you can remote share your screen as well. So somebody else could take over your mouse. Do you do that?
Yes, I actually do that. I started to do that in the last couple of years. I do Ableton training. So I train people how to produce and record and such. And it's been a great tool because sometimes explaining something, it's like, where's that button? Oh, it's over there on the left side. It's like, okay, where, like,
Oh, scroll down a little bit. Yeah. Oh, no, too much.
No, you went too far.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's pretty annoying. So it's nice to have remote control. Someone's like, just show me where the button is. I just remote control, boom, click. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. Well, okay, let's dive into a couple other tracks while we got some time.
Sure.
And I feel like this goes back to your earlier comment about nourishing music, and love can heal.
Funny enough, I'm circling all the way back. So did the band thing, then did the solo thing. And for a few years, I was completely just me. I don't really want to collaborate with anybody. I just want to do my own stuff. So then all the way back to the present, I feel like in a good space to collaborate. And I have been for many years at this point. But it took all that process and me just saying no to everybody to come to that realization. So the Little Wing plus Love Can Heal and another project that's going to be out later this year plus next year are a collaboration with me, John, and Taz. And these songs they're definitely more raw and we'll say more band oriented. So Love Can Heal was kind of a blend of those. That was a mix that we did of one of Taz's really great songs. And we made it kind of more funky, almost like a Daft Punk vibe. Like a slow, deep house, but it's also uplifting. The whole message is that love can heal anything. And that lyric repeats through the song, almost like a little bit of a mantra. So that was kind of our glimpse. Actually, those two songs were a kind of glimpse into, we'll just say, working with the three of us. Because as you might not, like, have you done a lot of music before with people, like collaborate?
I have more in college than recent days. But
you ever been in a band?
No, not really.
Okay.
I mean, I helped out with a band for a while, so I produced some tracks with them, but I wasn't like performing with them.
I gotcha. Well, you might know then, anytime you work with somebody, or especially you're in a band, or you do more than like a couple things, it's almost like as if you're in a marriage with somebody or a group of people. Did you ever get that from your time? And
I don't think we got that far. No. Maybe we're dating, but I don't think we quite got married.
That's funny. Yeah. So this is something that I've always laughed about, is that when you work with people, especially with more than just a song or a feature or whatever, it's almost as if you're engaging in a relationship with them, as if you were engaging in a marriage with somebody. And this is totally something that I've lived by, is that whatever we're doing and whatever the people around us are doing in terms of our collaborators, it has to match in the same wavelength, I guess. I don't want to get too woo-woo with this, but it has to be on the same vibration. And there was a sense when you're collaborating with someone, like it could be awesome, but also it could be like a little disconnected, even like 10% disconnected. It's going to feel a little weird, but the song might be cool. So we made those 2 tracks together, and then we actually decided, the 3 of us were going to get together in this room and make whatever comes out. We ended up making, I think, 9 songs over 3 days, which was an awesome landmark for us. So the 3 of us actually got together.
They were complete?
Well,
nearly?
No, we're still editing them to this day.
Okay.
It's essentially like, okay, if you can imagine, everyone has their own skill sets, I'm sure, as you figured out when you're involved in music. Some people are great at engineering. Some people are great at playing guitar. Some people are kind of good at everything, but maybe one thing. And for me, like, back to the meat potatoes, man, I'm really great at that. So I'm really great at the foundation. And I would say, out of the people I collaborate with, they know that, and they know that that's what I'm really strong with. And not to say I'm not great with leads and melodies and stuff, but that's just my, I guess, lead strength, you could say. And it's good that I know that, because I know that if I have a couple other people around me that are more strong with a lead or melody or something to carry it beyond the foundation, I don't have to do the work that I'm not the best at to get a good song. So with that recording process, it was awesome because I was able to focus on, we'll say, the low end, the drums. I played the electronic kit and just got like a groove going, maybe had like a bass loop happening. And then John obviously played guitar. It's his specialty. He's like just a guitar master. And then Taz was the piano, plus he had this Moog synthesizer. Awesome. We actually literally drove 10 minutes to their factory and bought one that week. It was kind of cool. So we had a 3-man band where I was doing a lot of the engineering with the beats and the bass, and then we were jamming, and we just had these big long jam sessions recorded for some tracks, and that led us to just really intently edit these. So again, back to what I was saying, we are all on this similar vibration and energy where we're sharing in music with each other in the same room, and this is what collaborating like really misses out on. But at the same time, it's nice to have that option. But having that was a super sweet experience because we're finishing up these songs now. We're like editing them, and just hearing them, there's a different rawness to it. And I really feel like, and this is why I mentioned this collaboration, because in those 2 tracks that you mentioned, Love Can Heal and Little Wing, those 2 are a great representation of what is to come from us in the future. These 9 songs I think we got.
Cool. Any teaser for the audience? Maybe what the album's called or anything you got?
I do not.
Okay.
I know we have
Tight-lipped.
Yeah.
Stay tuned.
We use placement names a lot, and then there's a series of revisions that we'll create. I think we might have nailed down the name Riders for one of the songs. I think that's like the only one that we've fully got down. But album name, no, we haven't thought about it. Like usually when the music's getting mastered, then we'll really figure that out. And cool. At this point, we're still like in the final mixing phases. It's you can imagine like deep house meets live electronic plus a jam band. That's kind of what this is. And it goes into these kind of more housey spaces, but then we also have songs that are a little more chill, traditional, like what people are used to hearing from us.
Nice.
Yeah.
And yeah, like when you say deep house, like I certainly think that your music has like an element of lightness. Like it is, and
sure, Lighthouse, that's a good one.
lightness. But like I don't mean sunlight necessarily.
Yeah.
Of course it could, but like it's not a heavy track. It's not like it weighs you down. It's
okay.
It's got like an elevating element to it.
Yeah. A little uplifting, I guess you could say.
Yeah, uplifting. So I'm curious, when you're trying to like create the vibe, or you get together, obviously you're all in the same room. You might start out with that foundation, the meat and potatoes, as you called it. Mm-hmm. But do you guys talk through what the meat and potatoes ought to be, or like what direction you're going? Are you going north, south?
Yeah, I guess when we start something, the thing about Ableton is you kind of have to start with the tempo. You got to start with some kind of thing to keep you on time. Click, click, click. So you have to create some form of structure before you. Well, it might not even be before. So that's actually, I'm just thinking about this now. So it could be where maybe one of us has, let's say, piano chords or a guitar riff, or I play the drums or bass or whatever. And then that might be the thing that shapes the tempo. And then from the tempo, we have a bit of a structure above our heads. And then from there, it becomes fairly simple to just fill in the blanks, I guess you could say. Like a little bit of a crossword puzzle with music.
Nice. And so tell me if I'm wrong, but like, are you kind of tossing out ideas, like you're all on your instruments, kind of just jamming, playing, kind of like feeling out ideas, and then something pops and you're like, that needs to be recorded right now?
Yeah. In this case, in this collab, we kind of had a mix of both. So there was a few times where we just jammed for like 6 minutes on something that we specifically deemed the chord progression, and then it became another chord progression as a chorus or something like that. But there were other times where we sat there and more did kind of like a studio thing where we came up with a beat and they were like, all right, play the piano part for this part, go. And then we all sat and watched him do that. Or then, okay, now it's my turn to play the drums, right? Record me, go. And I played the drums. So there's a bit of a mix of both. But for the majority of it, we had a big sense of like, these are going to be songs that we could play in a live setting with our instruments. And that's why I really feel like this is, for me, I like saying it's like next level, because I've always had live instruments in my tracks. Like I'd play most of the stuff on my own, but I never really played live because it might have been like a guitar riff or a piano thing. And taking a guitar or piano to a gig for like a song isn't the most easiest thing. So having a full set of songs with, we'll say, all the instruments that we're good at, there's piano, guitar, bass, and drums in every song. It was almost as if it's like an album from a band, if you could say. But it's not a band. It's just the three of us separately.
So I'd love to transition to another song of yours, titled Bliss. And this one is very airy. Again, I would call it light feeling, and it's got these like synths, but there's also like a crunchy bass, but I call it like a gentle crunchy. Like it's not like up in your face, but there's like a texture to it. So I'm curious about that song in general, some of the elements and sound design that you decided to put in it.
Yeah, that is a really great representation of the kind of music that I am gearing towards producing a little more these days. Definitely more upbeat, a steady beat. So I've done a lot of broken beat stuff, down tempo, like that broken beat, going to more just because it feels more, I guess, flowy in terms of what I would listen to if I was doing something around the house or gaming or cleaning. You know, it just has this other feeling to it. And I've done a lot of the down tempo stuff, and I love that. I love playing it. I love making it. I love playing music to it. But I wanted to kind of transition into another space. So that was produced in 2020, released in 21, and has a lot of elements from what I am having a bunch of music right now come out of me that has those similar elements. So a lot of not the same, but a lot of the similar feelings in the synths, those drums, and the basses that you were specifically talking about. I think it's the one that's like phom, 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 phom. Like it has like kind of a moving feeling to it. That is it's on the off beats, so there's a specific pattern for it, but the texture comes from, it's like a bit of an overdrive, almost like a distortion on like a subwave, like a sine wave, and that creates just a little upwards crest on the top of the sound is like almost like rolling out. That I started doing that a couple years ago with different basses, so that if someone's listening on like a phone or a laptop or a speaker that doesn't have a lot of bass, I want to make sure that they know what the bass is doing and feel it. Because sometimes if you play a song and there's just a sub and you play it on your phone, you're like, what is the song doing? Like, is there even coherency to it? But then you maybe listen to it on a bigger system and you feel, whoa, this is a totally different song. Like, there's a complete, sometimes lack of bass, we'll say, resonance on smaller devices. So I really wanted to make sure, and this is a great sound design tip for anybody, that the basses are coming through with that upper kind of gritty, lightly gritty tone to it. Because no matter where someone's listening, I want them to understand the song and the elements that create the vibe behind it. So having that was a cool thing on that song, but that's something I've been doing a lot recently, is just to make sure that the bass does translate. Because if that bass line wasn't there in the song, like if it was just a sub and you listen to it on a phone, it wouldn't really sound right, because there would be no rhythmic bass to carry it. It would just be like these leads that just kind of float in and out.
I see. So it was a conscious decision to add that like texture, which is a higher frequency, which therefore would translate to the smaller phones and
absolutely
devices.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's probably like mid, it's like 250 to 10,000 hertz. Like there's a little bit up top, but there's not a ton. It's just enough though to kind of poke through. You don't really want a ton of bass to come through the high frequencies, and not bass, not low frequency, but you don't want a ton of bass sounds to come through there when producing, because you don't want to conflict the parts. Like you wouldn't have the piano play the low notes and like the super low dong when there's like a sub bass. It just, you want to have a separation, almost as if like you're sitting in a room. This is how I like to think of music production, as if you're in a room or a box, and each corner of the box is its own element, and then you fit stuff back and forth and up and down. So if the bass is just so loud and overwhelming that it takes the piano out of the question, like you can't even hear the piano because the bass is so loud. And then vice versa, if like some other element's too loud, it'll stuff the bass down. So just being super aware, like as a piece of advice here to anyone like doing this, that it doesn't conflict with another element in the song. Like if the grittiness is too much, then it might not sound good with the guitar that I added. I mean, if you go all the way back years ago to like dubstep, when that was super popular, probably still is, but I don't listen to it that much. The basses are the leads. So the basses had the grit, but they did everything that you would expect like a piano or a guitar to do. So in this way, you're kind of filling that gap to still have the bass shine through, I guess you could say.
I know you're a visual person because you said so earlier, but that room analogy, do you think of the axes as like left, right, meaning like low frequency, high frequency, and loud, soft, or something? Do you think of it in that way, or do you just kind of visualize where the instruments would be in a room?
I guess it's kind of, I saw a picture once, and this kind of shaped what I'm thinking of here. You could say there's a X, Y, and a Z axis. So you could go up, down. You could go back and forward, but you can also go kind of up and down in volume. So the volume is totally independent of the frequency. Yep. As you know, if something's quiet or loud, that doesn't matter if it's 10,000 hertz. It could be a dog whistle or a 20 hertz subwave that just rattles your house. Like whatever the frequency is, you could always raise or lower the volume. So it's like, I don't know, you could say the Z axis. Yeah, completely independent. And then there's the frequency of things. So from 0 to, let's say, 20,000 hertz, we can't hear all the way up there, and we can't hear all the way down there, but there's the nice middle. We hear, I think, from somewhere around like 80 to something like 8,000, 10,000 or something like that. But there is more frequencies of music that do show up. So we can't hear the sub, but we could feel the sub. That's why you get a subwoofer in the system. So for that reason, I like to think of the box, again, like we'll say the volume is here. The frequencies kind of move over. So lows, mids, highs, and all that. And then there's like panning. Yeah, the depth, exactly. So there's panning that happens as well. So that would be left and right, spreading things out to the sides. And when I like to think of that house that I built of music, I want to make sure everything fits in the box and everything has its own place. Because as mentioned, if things are overlapping, like it could be cool, but it also just could mud things up. And especially in the more low end stuff, it just becomes really quick to fill because you can only have so many low frequencies. If there's like two things doing a low frequency, probably going to sound not that good.
Yeah. And that room in your analogy just must be constantly changing throughout the course of the song because like a new instrument pops in, something else comes out, something lowers, something raises. I feel like it would be like, you know, cool visualizer that you got going there, but like,
oh, thanks. Yeah.
I feel like that it's like that, but in, I don't know, a musical sense.
Yeah. The things that do stay consistent, and this is again back to the meat and potatoes, man. The foundation kind of feels steady throughout a whole song. The tone might change, the notes might change, but having a very consistent low end and drums to carry the song from start to finish, even if the drums stop for a bridge or a chorus or something, it's just good to have them be consistent throughout the song when they do happen, so that when someone's listening to it, they're not so thrown off by, okay, now it's a completely different drum set that just started to play. Like, okay, it might have its place to, you know, mix things like that. But in general, I feel like the songs that I enjoy the most have a very consistent feel with the rhythm and the low end. Things, as you mentioned, they're always shifting. Synths, guitars, pianos, they have this very transient feel to them where the piano might come out and the guitar might come in. Those are hitting at different frequencies, absolutely. But the drums and the bass, they're staying. They're always there holding that frequency down.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, I appreciate that analogy, and keep those coming. I like it.
Yeah, I've been really getting into doing production work on a live stream lately. So I just did my first one in this studio recently, and it's going to be something that I'm doing pretty regularly. So there's a...
And where can listeners find out about that? Where could they follow you and find out about the next time that you're doing it?
Yeah, so the easiest place to find me is on YouTube. It's Momentology Music. Exactly how it sounds is how it's spelled. Also going live on Twitch. And I have a network of friends and family on Facebook as well. I might be putting it up on there too. So this is a deep desire I have to share with people the productions that I'm doing. Not just like the song, but the process. Because the process to me is as important as the release of the song. And the process meaning how I got from nothing and then this to this and this and this and this, and then the final product, which you listen to on Spotify or SoundCloud or what have you. That's so much culminated work. I'm sure you understand like how much goes into that. So I felt at one point it was like so fun that I'm producing and I'm like by myself here in my room. I'm like, it's cool. Like I'm having a good time. I really love this. And at the same time, like what if I can like invite people in? So years ago I would invite people in. I lived in a house with a few other people and they would come in and just watch me produce and they might have some input and, you know, maybe even shake a shaker or something we put on the track. But it was never something that I really went out of my way to broadcast to the world. I had a few streams from I think 2018 to 2020 just kind of randomly, but recently this year I've really decided to hammer it down and really start focusing on sharing that because I have a great time producing. I love explaining stuff. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I'll just sit there in silence and work. But it's cool to be able to, for me as a watcher of someone who also produces music, to watch what their process is. Because even if you're an experienced producer, if you watch somebody else do it, you could still pick up things that you had no idea were even possible. I'm still learning stuff on Ableton to this day. I literally just figured out something else today, like this morning.
Oh, that's wonderful.
On Ableton. Yeah. So it's one of those things as if it's a continuous education thing for me. And sharing is, I guess, my service back to people is like continuous education. I'm going to be doing it anyway. I'm going to be sitting here producing music like every day without a doubt. So if I can maybe just go for an hour a couple times a week, people will be able to see that. And if that gives them a little glimpse into the process and how it was created, and then they hear that months later, a year later, or what have you, in their own Spotify Discover Weekly, they might be like, oh my God, that's that song. And it might be so cool for them. And that's a cool feeling that I like creating, but also for the people who are the creators of music to watch me as I will tune on to some people's streams sometimes and watch them. Two big inspirations that kind of had me create more of a energy for this. Deadmau5, Joel Zimmerman, you know, Deadmau5, he was doing these big production streams.
Gigantic
oh my God, dude.
thing of like a warehouse
Analogs.
Full of analog synths.
Yeah.
It's just absurd.
He's crazy. He's on a whole nother level,
yeah,
man.
absolutely crazy.
Like all that gear.
In kind of a good way.
It wouldn't even, in an absolute good way. He's crazy in an awesome way. Like that stuff wouldn't even fit on one of the, like his one walls wouldn't fit in my whole room. It's crazy how much time and energy and money that takes to build that, let alone understand how it works. And I have a huge respect for anyone who works with analog gear. I'm not a big analog guy. I've never been, but it is something that I love and respect. And like I mentioned a while ago, we had a Moog synth in here, and that was an awesome thing to really dial in a sound from really the original place and the original way that synthesizers came to be. There's kind of a disconnect, I would say, recently. I mean, probably ever since DAWs became a thing, but more recently, you load up something on Ableton. I see a lot of people using like Serum and Silent and Massive and all these sweet VST synths, and I love them. I use them too. They're awesome. And it's funny, I'll watch some of Deadmau5's streams, and he's using like Serum or something. He's got these like, 10K analog synths over here, and he's still using these things. But it's cool because he does both. And having the Moog here, it's like, we are so disconnected from what the synth started with, and the pure essence of it is a signal from the wall. It's a sine wave coming from your electrical outlet. That is a complete weird thing that some guy, Bob Moog, he figured out how to bring that and create a complete shift in the way that people recognize what that is, and it manifests in music. And that, for that reason, you can't play chords on the original synths like that. It's one note, because that one note is just one wave coming out of the electrical outlet, essentially, that goes through a bunch of transistors and processes, and then that keyboard that you hit creates that tone from that sine wave, and then boom, there's all these oscillations and things that the wave goes through, and that's how you hear these weird trippy sounds or nice soothing string sounds. It's all from that one sine wave. And it's mind-blowing to me that the computers that we use now can just create those sounds without even having to do with any of that. Yeah, this computer's plugged into the wall, but that's not happening in the way that the synth does. That's an electronic representation of it, So it's a whole nother level of respect that I have for that kind of gear. And yeah, back to what I was saying about the live stream, seeing him do that is pretty fun, because I'm totally far removed from that world. So just, again, learning stuff every day is like, oh my God, like what is he doing? It's like unplugging stuff, plugging them in.
Yeah, it's certainly fascinating to see others create. And you mentioned something about yourself being continuously educating yourself, but by sharing it with the world, you're continuously educating. Like you're following that trajectory that you started in school. Yeah, which is to share knowledge and to do that. So I'm curious, when you're doing your live streams, I haven't yet caught one. I will certainly keep an eye out for it. But when you're doing that, are you creating a brand new song from scratch, or are you kind of fine-tuning something that you already have?
That's a great question. So I have two different, we'll say, branches of streams that I've really got clear on. I wanted to just free flow and just hit live and then do whatever I do. But I really thought that I wanted to go in a bit of a more structured approach. So the two sides of it are production. So either me sitting here very similarly to right now, but you would see my webcam plus the view of my Mac through Ableton. So you would see actually what I'm doing on the screen. And then I got another camera hooked up. Like if I play guitar, it like focuses on the guitar. So that's like the production side of things. So you're seeing my mouse cursor move. You're seeing what I'm clicking. You're seeing not my keyboard, but I'm doing a bunch of keyboard shortcuts. You could probably see it on the screen. And then you see when I play something and how I record it and how I edit it and comp it. And that's one, we'll say, branch of it. And that's, again, I always need to produce. I always need to do this. It's essentially my job. So if I could share it with people and do it at the same time, it's just like a bonus, you know?
Man, yeah.
The other side of it, and this is what I'm most excited about because it's kind of, it's definitely unknown territory. Production is, it's like I'm going a drive down in my local childhood neighborhood. Like I can recall that instantly. I don't have any questions. I don't have to think too much because I just know what sounds good to me. The live stuff, now you said, are you playing stuff or making a song from scratch? So I just recently came upon a new computer because my 2015 MacBook Pro was not cutting it. And I decided to create an Ableton set. And I had been using Ableton before to DJ and perform live. I'd also been using Tractor. So I've been through a few different phases of what I use. If I'm using Tractor, I'm just playing a song that I've made and I might do some improv over it. Like I'll loop it and maybe if I have a piano or a guitar with me or something, some kind of instrument, then I'll play that over it. So this is a little bit different because it's using Ableton Live to perform. So instead of the production side, which is arrangement view, it's using session view, which is more clip based. So everything is laid out in front of me in terms of here's all my tracks, and it's set up specifically this way. They're all on the right side. These are all songs that I've made that are in a big library, as if it's like a DJ library. And then on the other side, so it's kind of split into right and left, it's all live elements that I could add at any moment. So the way I have it set up is I'm able to play a bass guitar and a guitar, not at the same time, it'd be hard. Piano with about, I think I have 8 different sounds set up to just put in and out at any moment on a slider. A bass synth, so like that bass synth you were talking about in that track Bliss, that's like a nice one that I have that I can pull upon at any moment. Drum kit, so we got this electronic drum kit, it's hooked up playing MIDI. This HPD, it's a hand drum. And I got a microphone so I could do some vocal stuff. And in terms of the instruments, that's pretty much it. I know it's like a lot of stuff, but this is like the bread and butter of it. It's combining all of the instruments with the live stuff from the tracks. So let's say I have this track where I have this guitar part. I'll take the guitar part out of the track and re-export it so I can play that guitar part live. So I'll have like a couple versions. So this is like really where the unknown comes in. I was saying that it's new and I don't know what's going to happen all the time. What I've been doing is I've been doing these loop jams. So this has been the most difficult part of this entire process of creating this live project, is having a coherency between all the instruments, how they communicate with Ableton, and how I can continue to have them play when I'm not doing them. So that's obviously called live looping. People do it all the time. It's pretty easy if you just have a controller or a button in front of you that says loop now. All right, stop the loop. It's super simple. But when you're dealing with a piano with 8 sounds, a bass guitar, a guitar, acoustic guitar as well, vocal, a bass, synth, drum kit, and a hand drum, and maybe vocals, it's like a lot of things to manage. So I was able to create, on Ableton, no pun intended, create a system to where I have all these foot pedals. You can't really see, but I have like 1, 2, 3, 4. I have about, I think, 14 different buttons that are just sending MIDI CC messages to Ableton. And those CC messages control a device in Ableton. Specifically for these, they're looper devices. So I have them set up on their respective tracks. So if you were to say the guitar is on, let's say, deck F. I have to have way more than A, B, C, D. So deck F is controlled by the guitar, and I could, slide up and down with the volume. I can EQ it, whatever. But on the floor down here, I have a control that says loop, so play or overdub, stop what I just played, so stop the loop, clear the loop, or undo what I just did. So in that way, I could play a beat, and that's another element of it. I have a bunch of clips of awesome beats that I've made over the years, and just different kind of drum samples that I've pulled from different various sources that I just love. And I could play those while also integrating the instruments. So play a beat, get that click going, which is also how I start a song typically, and then come up with some kind of drive to the song. It could be piano chords right away. It could be a bass line. It could be just a quick guitar, little palm mute thing. It could be another drum loop. I could add 3 or 4 drum loops and make like a bit of a tribal thing, and then slowly start adding stuff. And this is where this gets really explorative, is that I have all my tracks in Ableton labeled by their key, so that, let's just say I'm jamming on A minor. I love A minor. It's a great go-to. It's right in the middle. I could pick apart the song from my library that's A minor, because they're all color-coded with the specific key. I was able to create a system for that. And I could look like, boom, okay, the light purple is all A minor. So then I'm looking at, not looking, but I'm listening to what I'm doing, and I'm thinking, okay, BPM, let's say it's 100. I go over to the library and say, okay, we've got 100. I'm going to try to find something between 90 and 110 that's in A minor. So that part is what we're going to play, or that song is what we're going to play, and segue from what I might have been doing on the loop. It's not even a single device, about 6 different devices simultaneously that are all playing stuff. So in that way, it's almost as if I am my own band.
Yeah.
I can't obviously play the drums and the bass simultaneously, but I could play the drums, have it loop, and then play the bass the next moment. Yep. Exactly. So it's as if I'm tailoring in what I loved the most about a jam band. So they're just free flowing, they're having a great time, and there's no commitment to anything except where they start and where they end. And to me, that's one of the coolest parts about jamming with somebody or playing music with myself, is that I know how the song starts and I know when the song ends, but I don't know what's going to happen in the middle. So starting something from scratch, I know it's going to start on 100 BPM and I'm going to be in A minor. That's it. And then from there, there's trillions of possibilities of what could happen. Music, there's so many possibilities between instruments and chords and notes and keys and rhythms. So then bringing it all back, so let's say do some kind of a loop jam, I like to call it, over 5 minutes, and then having a song that I have produced in the past come in slowly. And another aspect is I'm able to loop what songs I'm playing, like with my feet. That's pretty awesome. It's been a new development. Click 2 buttons and do an in and out looper. So then from there, it's almost as if I'm DJing, like what you said, a new song from scratch, but I didn't DJ it. I literally created it from the ground up with a song that I have created, and do my best to blend them in, because obviously audio levels can be totally different on all that stuff. So it's as if I'm in a way producing music, because I am recording it, but they might never be songs. They might just live, and then just that's it. They kind of get blown into the ether, and then playing with the DJ element of it as well, and then mixing them in. And that gives me a complete freedom to really just flow with whatever I'm feeling at that moment. So I might just DJ for 30 minutes, and then I might do a 25-minute loop jam, and that's it. I might do a loop jam for 10 minutes, DJ for 5, loop jam for 2. It's completely able to be molded and free flowed to whatever it is that I feel at that moment. And that's why I love this system that I made. It's taken a long time to do.
Oh, I bet. That sounds immensely complex.
Yeah.
And I've just got like a quick technical question on that.
Yeah.
Are all your instruments going through the same pedals? Like, or do you have to unplug and replug stuff?
Oh,
as you move
okay, yeah,
around?
I see. So guitar and bass, those are the only hard input, like quarter-inch inputs. Yeah. So the looping is all done on Ableton. So
oh, interesting. So it just has to get into Ableton.
It just has to get into Ableton,
then,
exactly.
And then you've got access to everything.
Exactly.
Right.
So I have an
That's
interface with like 8 inputs and 8 outputs, or 16 outputs, and the guitar and bass are in one, funny enough, I got a pedal. I didn't even know at the time, but I bought a pedal that had 2 inputs. So I have a pedal that has hardware effects. So, a wah, reverb, delays and stuff that's all sunk up with Ableton's clock that allows me to have 2 instruments simultaneously plugged in. So yeah, I don't have to unplug anything on that element. And then the drums are all MIDI. So it's just being controlled through Ableton and the hand drum. And then the keyboard's all MIDI as well. So the only things that are actual like real instruments producing sound in the world without Ableton would be my voice, so through the microphone, and then a guitar and a bass. You could really hear these drums though if you mic them up.
Yeah, I bet. Get the rubber sound.
Exactly. We actually recorded that, funny enough, on that project I was talking about with Number 13 and DJ Taz. I was playing this rhythm on the drum kit and I didn't have any sound coming out because we just like got in the studio for the day and I haven't even turned on the computer. I was like playing this really sweet thing, but I was making it from the acoustic sound of the electronic drum kit. I know it's the weirdest thing to think about, but we actually mic'd it up and we recorded it, and it's one of the tracks.
Oh, nice. And my thought initially was that it was just to capture the idea, and then you go back and do it differently.
It was to capture the idea. It was so good. The idea
was good enough. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, there's like this tone.
That's amazing.
When you really hit the edge of that drum hard, it's like a slap almost, and it's almost like a crack. So it was like this really tribal rhythm that I was doing that I didn't even know what it would translate to on like with a MIDI instrument, but it just translated so well in the real world that I was just like, that's the one, we're keeping that.
Nice. Just one other quick track, because my notes are about the drums. So I'm just curious, maybe this is the track, or maybe it has yet to be released, but Rising Stars. The snare is like a really complex clap, I would say. Like there's like multiple things happening. It's not a single sound. And then like you got a really soft hi-hat. And then the kick rhythm is just like, I mean, it's a pretty complex kick rhythm if you ask me. So I'm curious about that. Were you playing that yourself, or were you collaborating? Or
Rising Stars, that's an original track. I was talking about the more interest in deep house music and steady beat stuff. That's kind of like one of the first ones I made in that realm. It's a steady beat song. And I've always loved, I know you're talking about the claps and snares and stuff. I've always loved not going with like a normal something, whether it's like a single snare or a single clap or a snap or something. Sometimes I will, if it's an element I want to keep kind of monotone and have everything else be a little more complicated and complex musically, I might have like a really bland snare or clap or something. But I remember that track, making it was, I think, about 4 different kinds of claps, snaps, and snares blended on each other for the main part. So what I love doing, is another great tip here, is if you're using Ableton, I'm 99.9% sure it's this easy in other DAWs, but to unwarp something so it's not on the grid, so you can move it wherever you want.
Oh, I see. Yep.
Yeah. And start the sample, if it's a clap, like really a millisecond, 10 milliseconds before it's supposed to come in. So if you're looking at like a grid, 4/4 grid, let's just say 1 bar, like the 1.2 we'll say is where the snare should come in. So I would put the start of one of the samples at like 1.17 or 1.19, and then I would have another one of the samples start at, let's say, 1.21, and then there's a couple that are right on the 1.2. So in that way, it's almost as if creating a totally original sample from a bunch of different other things that isn't just a traditional on the beat. There's a bit of a lead in, and then there's a bit of a trail off, because it has way more than just the one thing happening on when it's supposed to happen. And then from there, what I do like doing is taking that, and let's say I stretch it out over 8 bars, then I'll individually change the positioning of, let's say, a third of those, so that every time the clap comes in, it's not the same clap that came in the last time. It's a little different. It might even just be like 20 milliseconds shifted to the right, but it's different. And to me, I like that in music when I'm listening, because it takes a little more energy to dial that in. Like, there's so many aspects of music that sometimes claps are just like overlooked. It's like, all right, I'm gonna put the clap there and there, and that's it. You know, we'll focus on the guitar. But I'm like, what are the little tiny sounds that people sometimes don't focus on? It's like the claps, hi-hats. Like, there's so many really cool things that could kind of shape the song. Some of my favorite songs I just love because of the drums and the way, kind of like what you're saying, like, it's just so unique in the way that they design the sounds.
Yeah, well, that's great, and I appreciate you pulling back the curtain, revealing how you did it. You shift one before, shift one a little after.
Yeah,
have 2 right on the dot.
Yeah, maybe I'll do a little tutorial on that.
Hey, man, I think it's gold for anybody out there who's a producer and interested in this stuff. Well, another track, Grateful. I'm curious about this one. I know we've kind of we connected earlier, and a playlist had a big impact on this. And I'm curious, you know, what your perspective is on it, and how it got to be like on that playlist, and the song itself, some of the inspiration. So, however you want to take that, pretty open.
Sure. Yeah, that's a awesome track. It was a remix. It was one of those pressure cooker remixes. I had the opportunity come to me. It's a couple day deadline. Funny enough, it was one of those things where I was given the option, like, hey, do you want to remix this track? And if you do, it's probably due on Monday. And it's like Friday. I'm like, what? Like, I don't think I can. All right, I'll do it. It was like a quick decision, because I listened to the song. I'm like, I actually really like this song. And I probably would have remixed it, but it probably would have taken me a month or 2 to finish it up. So pressure cooker was like, I had to make it in my mind. I didn't have to, because it wasn't necessary. So I ended up, and this was original artist, Equanimous, Nate. Awesome person, awesome producer. Go check his music out if you haven't. I know you have talked with him in the past. So this was like over a Saturday and a Sunday. I don't know how long I worked, but I just like, I'm gonna get this done. I did as much work as I needed to do on a Saturday, exported it, went about my day, listened to it, and then on Sunday I came back and I'm like, okay, I took all these notes on my phone. That's usually how I do it. I'll export the song, go about my life, and then I'll come back and I'll have notes. And then I made all the notes, and it's like it needed more. It wasn't like what I wanted it to be, and that's when Ruby had her hand. Ruby Chase had her hand at some vocals on the track. So we ended up at that point kind of co-producing the song in a way, because I did a couple of my own edits, and then she had all this other input with the song, and it actually became a completely new kind of morphed creation from what she had in her mind, what I had in my mind, and then you come together and you got this totally different thing than each of you started with. And it was a Equanimous song to begin with. So it was like 3 people in a pressure cooker. Equanimous didn't have to do anything. It's a remix, so we do it. So I just remember, like, we went back and forth a couple times, and it was just so easy, the process. It was sometimes the process of making music is like long and arduous and tough, and you're just like, when's this song gonna be done? I'm working on it for 2 years. There's some times where it just gets unpleasant. So with this one, it was so quick, so pleasant. Sometimes it happens that way, and it's a total roll of the dice. I'm really grateful, no pun intended, that it did happen that way, because if it didn't, if it was like really stressful to create the song in that amount of time, I wouldn't have done it, because it wasn't something, I don't like getting stressed out about music. I want to make sure it flows. So that was put on the remix album, and I think we did as a single as well, but it was uploaded like, I think 4 days after I initially started the project, which is, it has to be a record, because I don't know if I've ever done that before. I can't remember a time ever. I think I had like a 2-weeker where I 2 week then uploaded it, and that was like crazy fast. But this was just so fast. It just came out so easy. And then anytime you release music, you don't know if people are going to like it. And that's the truth of it. You could release an awesome song that you put your entire being into, that you think is the best song in the world, and it could get very little recognition from your fans or the world. It's kind of, we'll say it could be upsetting, but it's also humbling, because you're like, all right, well, something I did there didn't work, so what can I do now? So it's just a continuous process of improvement. So in this case, this was a song where I'm like, I love this track, it's going to do great, and then hands off, and then I just kind of let it take its own life. And that's not let it take its own life, but let it lead its own life. I let it out of the
take on its own life.
Take on its own life. There we go. So we ended up having it out there. It was doing great. People loved it. Super great feedback. And then I woke up one morning and it's like, I think I got an email or something. I don't know how Spotify does it. I can't really remember, but I think I saw the playlist like on the stats that day, and it bumped it up. It like tripled the plays in like one day. I'm like, what is happening? Because it doesn't happen all the time. And this is where I think part of your question was it's a Spotify editorial playlist. So it's somebody, or not somebody, but the company Spotify has all these playlists that they make that they feel like are good for what they say, and then they add songs based on that. So they have their music experts add a song. It's probably a great job. I would love to do that. So whoever listened to that song that day, because the new releases probably come in first on their desk or whatever, they must have heard it and thought it'd be great for a morning run. So the playlist is a morning run playlist, funny enough. I didn't even know that playlist existed, and that's why this is kind of funny. And the track was made in so quick. It was just like the quickest, easiest production, and then a hands off, and then boom, it ends up on this playlist. I'm like, how did that even happen? It's one of those things where I just say, okay, thank you, and then I go on a run with the song.
That's great. That's great. Well, it is very fascinating to see how certain things just kind of take off and catch fire real easily and without effort, and then perhaps the other thing that you put in way more effort doesn't gather that steam.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I guess it kind of goes back to just creating without like the expectation of a particular outcome. Kind of like when you're doing your live streams and you've got maybe the structure, but then you've got that loop jam, as you call it.
Yeah.
And who knows what's going to happen there. Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a bit risky, because there are times where I'm jamming by myself, like doing that stuff where I don't hit live and I'm just, playing around and practicing and trying to configure a new piece of gear, and something is like so awesome and I don't even hit record or anything. It's just gone. Like it's never gonna play again, and I'll never be able to recreate that again. Yep. It's cool. But there's also times where I'm jamming and I'm having such a hard time possibly with like the rhythm or the beats, and it just sounds horrible. And I'll just be honest with you, it happens. Yeah. Sometimes music isn't always easy and it doesn't come out that great. So that's kind of what I was saying, is it's a bit of a risk, because if I'm DJing my songs, I know that song works. I know that song works. I know that song works. I know the songs work because I played.
And it's not going to change.
Exactly. You can't hit a wrong note as a DJ. I mean, you could hit play at the wrong time, but it's all time coded, so it's all going to go in the same rhythm. You could always just kill the volume. If I'm like looping and I hit a wrong note, there's an undo button, but it's risky because whatever I'm doing could be the most amazing thing I've ever done in that moment. It could be the an epic jam, or it could totally fall in on itself and be like, what is this guy doing? You know, there's a lot of risk taking to this musically in that way. And that's all the way back to the beginning of our conversation. It's what I loved and respected, I still do, about Fish, is that they are like musical risk takers. At this point, they're so trained to take risks musically that it's ingrained and they're not even taking risks anymore. But to play a 5-minute song and then go into a 35-minute jam where they have no idea what's going to happen, the jam could have ended 10 minutes ago, or it could go on for another 30 minutes. Like, they've played 50-minute songs before. That is like, that's where music was created. That's the essence of it. We only started doing records like, it's not that long. Before that, it was dudes sitting on their porch with their guitars and singing, and then jamming, and then another guy comes over, and then someone's drumming on something. And that is, to me, like the best part of music. It's not knowing what's going to happen next. It's having an openness and a willingness to go there. So a lot of times DJs, bands will just play a set. They'll play their rehearsals. It's great. Like, you came to see that thing, and that's what you get. Tool is a great example of this. They play a very similar song as their album, and a lot of their sets sound really close to their albums. They might do a little different stuff here and there, but they're pretty consistent, and that's them. And then on the other side of it, you have the more risky to reward, and that's the other part of this, is there's a big reward in that. If you go to these places and you are successful, if you have a weird, crazy loop jam that ends up being like, wow, I cannot believe I just made that, then there's a reward at the end that says you did that, you took the risk, and then it had an effect on the watchers, on you. Mostly it's me. I feel like in these processes I have such a relief when that happens, that actually influences the music, because like I've just planned all this stuff in my head, and then it came out, and then it actually sounds good, and then people actually like it. That's awesome. And then the relief actually creates better music. So it's like a call and response with myself, essentially.
And I love the phrase you use, musical risk taking. I haven't heard that, but I certainly understand what you're saying, and I've seen it in action, and you're like, there's no way that guitar riff is going to get back to where they're going in just a bar. Like, that guy went way off. Yeah. And anyways, I appreciate the terminology there. And
do you have favorite jam bands of yours that would do that?
Well, there's a band back in the day. I think they've broken up or gone their separate ways. They were actually featured on the podcast early on. They're called Gypsy Moon. They're a bluegrass band.
Nice.
And Silas Herman, he's the mandolin player, and his father, I think, is in Leftover Salmon. I think he's the lead vocalist.
Okay. Yeah, I do know that.
Anyways, bluegrass. But he's just an amazing mando player, and I've just never seen anybody play that instrument like him. And he was just, I recall there's sometimes at live shows where you know that they're going to go through this song, and you kind of know that the chorus is coming up or whatever. Yeah. But then he would just go take a hard left right before the chorus, and you're like, oh shit, is this going to work out? You know,
yeah, is this going to work?
Yeah. And then he, would able to weave it back in like, 64th notes or something. I don't know how he did it, but
it's a skill in itself. Like the improv, I love mandolin as well. Like I have a mandolin. I don't play it a ton, but I do love it. It's a very interesting instrument, especially I have like big hands, so like putting them on the little tiny frets are so hard for me. But with the bluegrass, that's what I was talking about. Like guys on their front porch decades ago, century maybe ago, that's what they were doing. They were playing that style of music. Whether it was like blues, like more of a BB King thing, or the bluegrass. You have the essence of music is just getting together, playing music. Say recording it, you're just playing, then you go. And then you remember that was an awesome time. Let's do it again. And I feel like now, just having you say that, you understand as the basic element, because bluegrass is like such a foundation to our musical world, and R&B. That all stemmed from those initial people playing their guitar. So that's still like I don't know what you call like a relic genre in our country. I don't know if bluegrass is so popular in the whole world, but it's definitely a relic genre just because that's how it started. And it's like, if it could still access that, it's just amazing. I love that.
Of course, there's no elements of loops in that style of music, but when you're putting yourself out there and doing those loop jams, when you hit record and you publish it online, there's got to be uncertainty, maybe a little nerves going on. Like, am I feeling it today?
Yeah.
Am I 100% or should I not hit record?
Yeah.
So, of course you're going to make mistakes when you're playing live and experimenting new things. But how do you deal with that in the moment, or like maybe negative comments? I don't know if you've ever had any of those, but do you just kind of wash them away, or just not pay attention? Or
most of the negative comments are within myself. Music doesn't really inspire negativity too much. I don't really feel like there's a space for it. I mean, maybe if the music is aggressive, maybe, but I think I'm making pretty positive and, as you said, uplifting music. So most of the time I don't see any of that or hear any of that, but there are definitely some times where the self-talk within me, is like doubts. So most of the time it's just being a little bit overwhelmed with how much I can do. So there's so many different avenues at any moment. You could do it at 60 BPM or 70 or 100 or 120. You could do something with this rhythm or that rhythm. It's like there's so many options, and having that sometimes option is almost a little defeating, because there's no like, all right, that's how I'm starting. Again, like if you're in a band, that's the first song and you're going to play that first song, it's this, and then it finishes with that, and you're all on the same page. This is, again, it's like a total I don't know moment, because I don't know what's going to happen at the next moment or the next moment after that. So it's, I guess, where the stem of my moniker, my music moniker, comes from. Momentology is living and being in the moment, and just having a trust that it's going to work out. Even if something happens, it's still going to work out. Because I have a knob it's called the bad mix bailer. And I just twist the knob and it just goes, and I just lower the volume. And it's like, okay, starting over.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's like the eject button.
Exactly.
On an airplane or something.
Exactly. And you could kind of make it purposeful. Like if it sounds that bad, you can actually make it sound worse. And you're like, I meant to do that.
Yep.
If you're watching this, I might not have meant to do that.
Yeah, fair. That's good.
Yeah.
So when you've mentioned that when you sit down to create music, if things are just not coming to you've said that you don't want to force it. You don't want music to be stressful. You don't want to fight through it, so to speak. What do you do on a day that you're supposed to be working on a track, or you've got a collaboration and things just aren't flowing as effortlessly as you would like?
I usually go outside.
Strategies?
I go outside and play disc golf.
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
I get back to nature and connect. Disc golf is an amazing activity for anyone who hasn't done it. You're just in the woods or at a public park, just throwing a frisbee at a basket. That's it. And then you just get better at it. And it's always been a way for me to clear my head and just get out of this room, because there's so much technology in here that, like you said, some days I'm just like, I can't pull myself up at this moment to make something beautiful. So I go outside and I go back to the original beauty. It's the world around us and the outside, and all the leaves and all the trees, and seeing all the animals playing and making noises and stuff. That right there that's us. We're just a little different. We're a human in a taller body or not taller than a tree, but bigger than the little tiny animals running around, that's able to think in these crazy complex ways and make wild stuff. So if I ever get too a little, we'll say, uninspired because of circumstances, there's no one real reason why it happens. It's just like not feeling it. Just try to go back out and be in nature, because that's essentially what created us in the first place. And that there's harmony all around. Like, they don't need to feel good to produce oxygen. They're just doing it. The birds don't need to feel great to chirp. Like, that's what they do. So then if I go back out there, it's almost like a bit of entrainment to where syncing up with that. Okay, we're all good. Cool. Now I feel better, and I go back in, and hopefully then it works well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. What advice would you give to a young musician starting out today?
I would say start simple and don't overthink things a lot. I did a lot of overthinking with some different songs, and sometimes the more you add, the more you think, the worse it sounds. It's weird. Sometimes the more simple something is, the more people can relate to it. So if you could tailor it back a little bit, yeah, cool, you can learn a billion technical things about the song, but the song in general that you're making or playing or producing, make it a little more simple. Just dial it back a little bit to that essence where we're talking about we're outside, this is the trees and the animals and everything. They're all living in that all the time. So what can you do to kind of bring that through in the music? Is it going to be chaotic and crazy? Like if that's the kind of music you're making, cool. But if you just want to make something that people really feel good about, try to think of that. Think about, if I was a tree, how would I sound right now?
Wow, that's a question that I have yet to ask myself.
Yeah.
That's a good one, though. Oh, I appreciate that advice.
Of course. I have recorded Leaves, by the way, and I put them in a track. Leaves in a Chicago winter when it was like 30 degrees out. And the leaves they've been dead for the longest time. They were all like crusty, barely hanging on. And I walked under the tree and it was just like making these really cool noises. It was like very unique. I've never ever heard a sound like that. So I just popped my phone up there and recorded it. And that's how a tree could sound, but not physically what I meant by that. I guess it's more of like the internal process is like, how would a tree sound if it was just like sitting there and super strong and being right in front of you, if you could hear it talk.
Interesting way of reframing sound into the natural world and thinking about how to create. So that's wonderful.
Yeah. Everything is a vibration and a wave essentially coming out of our vocal cords or just the visual. It's all audio visual waves that are being thrown at the world around us. So if you can connect to that and create music from that place, it's a little, what I would say, a little more helpful for people rather than try to create something a little disharmonious. Create something harmonious with the things that created us. And then I think we'll see a little bit more kinder world if you're listening to that kind of music.
Nice.
Yeah.
I appreciate that message. Well, is there anything else that you would like to share that we have yet to cover?
I feel pretty good. I feel like we have talked about a bunch. Anything that I've wanted to share, I think I spoke of already. I'm just excited to continue to share live sets and production on stream. And also, anytime I go live, it saves a video of it on my YouTube. So even if you can't catch me in the moment where I'm doing it, you could look the next day or look 2 months ago, and this is another really cool part about this is you can see as things progress. And that's something that I would just love to invite everybody to see my process and how I work, and then also get feedback. That's actually the biggest part of what someone told me the other day was, as I'm doing this, I would love to hear what you all are feeling and thinking about the song. So if you're watching and you're like, that sound feels a little too invasive, I want to know. I really do, because I would love to see and hear the feedback. I might not do something about it, but it might be like, you know what, that is a little invasive. So creating the actual exchange between the people who would listen to my songs and myself is really rewarding, and I'm excited about that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely.
And Patrick, your wealth of knowledge and willingness to share everything has been wonderful. I really appreciate the fact that you got so in depth on certain things like the snare on Ableton and how many snares and how many milliseconds you're moving stuff. So I think that hopefully other musicians out there will find this helpful, and I really appreciate your time and your music and your energy. So thanks.
Absolutely, brother. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate talking with you, and I love all the questions, and I can't wait to share more. Till next time.
listening to the Freio Music Podcast with Michael Morahan. Be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss a single episode. And don't forget to share this podcast everywhere. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay tuned.
Freio Music, Freio Music, Freio Music, Freio Music. You are listening to Freio Music.
Stay tuned. Stay tuned.